Hello and welcome to Doof Game Club, Doof Media's exploration of the joy of play. I'm Ruben Morehouse,
I'm Elliot Diebold.
and we are back for our second ever Doof Game Club. Hooray, we made it.
Woo.
We're in second episode. It's official. We're here. We're talking about Transistor today. Thanks everyone for joining. We've got a very active chat already, sharing their opinions about this game, which I mean, I can officially say is our most divisive game club game ever.
I mean, yep, that's not a huge statement, but yeah, it's
I think
definitely
it will
more.
hold the title for a little while at least.
Oh, yeah, we'll see. It's definitely a more mixed reception to Hollow Knight, which will be interesting, I think, to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, should we jump straight into the discussion, Elliot?
Yeah, let me switch us over to the next slide. Oh, I guess we already covered this. Transistors by Supergiant Games, I suppose.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, who, I think this is my first Supergiant game. I believe you've played some of the others, Ruben?
Yes, I've played their first game, Bastion, which kind of made them pretty famous. It was a huge success. And I think there's going to have to be some light comparisons to Bastion, but I'll try and stick mostly to this. And also their subsequent game, Pyre, which also has some interesting things. I think Transistor is a game that is most interesting in its context of Bastion and Pyre. I haven't played their most recent game, Hades, or I don't know if that's fully out yet or if it's just like partially released or early released or something, but I haven't played it anyway, so who cares?
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I'll get into it. So this first clip is just literally what happens when you open the game.
Hey, Red. We're not gonna get away with this, are we? Come on, pull. There. Together again.
Yeah. So I guess just the reason I included that clip was this is one of the first games for me where like there was no menu or anything. Like I opened the executable and I was in gameplay. Like that little bit with me like running around there was just like kind of in disbelief. I was like, wait, this is already it?
It's already begun?
I had to go and then dive into the menus because let's just get this complaint out of the way. I did not have fun playing this on a PC because it would not go to the same resolution as my monitor. So I was actually playing most of this game windowed because that way it could take up half my monitor, which was fine. But like it made it harder to get immersed. But yeah, it was interesting how it was just I haven't had that happen too often where like a game will just throw you straight in.
I think this just implies to me that you haven't played a lot of more indie games. It's a very indie game thing to do, Elliot, because when you're an indie developer, building a main menu, it's like
I've had
who
to
has
build a
time
menu.
to do that?
I've had to build a menu. They're a surprisingly large pain in the ass in game.
Yeah, I know.
Like, it's
right?
crazy.
Yeah, so if you play a lot of games on like itch.io or some of these indie game sites, you'll notice a lot of them just do this, where it's a bit of this like double-edged thing where or like, what's the positive of a double-edged sword? A win-win situation. That's it. Where you both don't have to spend the energy building the main menu, but also it's like it gets you immediately into the action and it can be more immersive, especially in a game which is very story-based, like Transistor, right? It's like get you right into the action without having to be like, okay, I'm sitting down to play a game and let me change my main menu settings and click begin game, like every game makes you do for some reason.
Especially in recent times, I'll often buy a game and I'm really excited to get into it, and then they like throw a character creator at me, which is just like talk about decision paralysis.
Yeah, that
like,
goes away an hour, right?
I've just started going with default character skins or like
just click randomize three times.
I click random and just go with that because it's just otherwise that's the first 3 hours of my gameplay, and by the time I've created a character I'm not excited to play the game anymore.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah, I love how you can
play
just
D&D. I just want to enjoy this game.
Yeah, character creators exist in my opinion for Monster Factory and not for actual people.
Exactly. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I kind of like it's interesting. I think something that I'm going to start touching on is this game is a product of efficient game creation. You know, like there's a lot of things in here that seem like they're made to explicitly focus on the thing this game wants to focus on and not do any of the other stuff. Like I think Supergiant Games is a small studio, and they've released quite a large number of successful games because they kind of grok that their process doesn't need to be so much focusing on the faff, the extra bits, but that also has its downsides, which we'll get to. And I think this is kind of our first example of that.
Yeah, and I'd count this as a pro. I found it fun to just jump straight in. I actually quite liked that.
Yeah. Let's play the next clip, Elliot, which is the same clip, but with me reacting to it instead of you reacting, and let's see the differences in our reactions.
I didn't actually know this was in here.
Come on, pull.
Oh boy, kills today. That is fun. Stairs leading down 36. The thing I wanted to talk about here is just I really liked the fact that everything just had a little data byline to it. It made me laugh almost, like about half of them are jokes.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And it's a really funny way of just building in this slight bit of comedy to it, to kind of get you through the game, but also it kind of introduces one of the core narrative concepts that everything in this world is kind of being represented just as data, which is a core part of the like story. But you don't need to know that at the start, but it just kind of starts hinting at you can see this world just as bits of data. And that's like a really fun way to start introducing that concept while also giving you an avenue to make some pretty funny jokes, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. They sort of use it in equal parts for world building, for just telling funny jokes. Like that one there, when Transistor itself says kills today 1. Like the first time I was playing through the game, it was just kind of like, okay, like I didn't really think anything of it. And then when I what do they call New Game Plus in this again? It's called recursion. So like when I recursed, it's like it says kills today 1. I was like, oh, like, completely different reaction the second time. But yeah, like so I agree. I thought they were always fun to see. Like it didn't bother me whenever they sort of came up. I was like, oh, like even stairs leading down. What a useless piece of information, but it tells you so much.
It's so good. Yeah, just the fact that this world is full of meaningless data is such a fun joke, but also like part of the world.
Yeah.
I guess I want to kind of start talking about, like, we're going to be talking about the story here because we touched on the idea that this is a divisive game amongst the responses that we've seen from our patrons and our community. And that mostly, I think, revolves around the story of the game, right? But before we kind of get into that, I just kind of want to touch on, I guess, what I'll call the story atmosphere. Like, not the atmosphere in terms of art and music stuff, but the way that this game kind of sets like a narrative atmosphere in this setting.
The tone?
Yeah, I guess it is tone, but it's also, to an extent, the story. Let's play the next clip. Play the next clip.
Let me play the clip.
Red, have a look out there. Toward high rise. Traverson Hall. The annex building. They're not there anymore. Half the skyline's disappeared. Whatever's after us, it's spreading. The Camerata. They'd rip this whole town apart. To get us. Or to get away.
I guess the word I'm looking for is the setting. It's the setting of you're in a city, a New York City, a bit of a, kind of cyberpunky style thing.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's a cyber noir vibe, is how I describe it.
But then the setting and the kind of key idea that this city is emptying around you, and you're in this city on a day when, while it normally would be hustling and bustling, it's basically all just starting to slip away into the abyss, right? And I just think that's a really interesting and compelling setting. I think it the first few hours of this game, you really don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But arguably for the entire game you don't know what's going on. But the setting of a city that has just started to slip away is genuinely so captivating and compelling, and it really was the thing that carried me through this game, was wanting to find out what's going on with this disappearing city.
Yeah, and it's quite a unique vibe. I don't know. Like I've seen sort of cyber noir stuff before. Like, obviously, people who've listened to some of our other stuff know like how much I love like Blade Runner, but it's definitely got like its own tone because there's that extra focus on like the data part of the cyber.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you've got the music, which is obviously, we'll talk more about the music later, but it fits into the vibe so well. I think one of the things this game does very well is with this atmosphere, establish it like through all aspects, like art, even the gameplay, and the music as well.
Yeah, I kind of want to put a finer spin on it as well, which is that in movies, I'm not thinking of a huge amount of examples, but movies like, I guess, I think this applies to Wreck-It Ralph, and this applies to, I think, the Emoji Movie as well. But in movies that take place in a digital world, often the final climax of the movie is, oh, this digital world is being erased and we have to stop it, right? And that's like the final 5 to 10 minutes of the plot of whatever that movie is. And it always is this kind of manic, like frantic fight. Whereas in this, the tone of it is different. It's sad and melancholy, yes, and like depressing that this thing is slowly being consumed. And I think that's the difference to it for me, is it takes this concept that I haven't really seen applied over a longer period of time and uses it, and that gives it such a different feeling, such a feeling that I think is unique, or I haven't experienced it much elsewhere.
Yeah, you're right. There is definitely a bit of a, melancholy is just the perfect word for it. Like, you do spend half of it as the world is being processed. You are like behind the process, and so you're just kind of going through, and it's like a dead world. Like, I think the other big game that a lot of people probably play that has this sort of vibe is like Breath of the Wild. Like, obviously very different, but like it's that same sort of emptiness feeling where you're walking through a world that has passed, and you are like this witness.
But it's not even that. It's like the first day of the apocalypse, you know? Because you're like hot on the heels of what is functionally a post-apocalyptic world.
Fair.
Which I liked that it was riding that line between kind of a modern city but also like post-apocalyptic. I just thought that setting was it felt very unique to me, even though that's not something that I think is like post-apocalyptic stories aren't unique, but this one managed to find a setting that felt unique, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
So just before I start us on our next point, I just wanted to talk about how, like, so obviously in the game we play as Red, who was this singer, and she's a silent protagonist, although like it's actually kind of worked into the story in this game in that she's literally had her voice stolen. But I guess something that a lot of games struggle with silent protagonists is actually giving them any character. And sometimes like that's on purpose. Like in Zelda, the whole point of Link being a silent protagonist is he's not meant to have a personality. But like in this game, I'll play the clip.
What's the latest? That does it. I swear this day. Get myself killed. Now the game's canceled.
So the big thing I wanted to talk about here is like not just that there's the message, but
hoping that'll do it for the bad news for a while.
You get Red typing stuff out and then deleting it, and that's how we get a lot of our impression of like her and where her head's at. And I thought that was such like just a unique and interesting way to characterize a silent protagonist by having them not just type out messages, but showing us what she's thinking and then decides she doesn't want to say.
Yeah, writing and erasing things is such a great way of showing like a conflicted nature in a character. And I think it was used masterfully here. I
Yeah.
also just, it didn't occur to me until I was just watching this clip, but one of the sports teams here is called the Clientele. What kind of fucking futuristic name for a sports team is the Clientele? Such nonsense. I love it.
I
What a
mean,
great sense of
my
humor
favorite
it
little
has.
detail in all this was this reporter who's doing most of the new stuff. Their name is like some crazy thing on like Narciso or
Yeah.
no, like, yeah, so that's fun. Yeah, like this is definitely a game where you can walk over a lot of the details very easily if you're not paying attention. Like you definitely need to be
Yeah.
watching it.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I guess to continue the beats of the atmosphere, we get there are a few parts. Actually, let's play the clip and we'll talk about it after.
What happened? You know, I never thought much of a high-rise. Far from the water. Then I found out you lived here.
The thing I want to talk about here is there's parts of the game, relatively large parts. I would say maybe what a fifth of the game potentially, where Transistor is, I guess, drunk is the right word for it.
Yeah, he's
He
being
gets
disrupted by the
Yes.
spine or whatever, and yeah.
Yes, and it really helps. I think one of the criticisms that I have of this game, which we'll get to, is I don't feel like it hugely differentiates the areas that you move through in the game. But there are parts where you have things like drunk Transistor or the spine bursting out of walls or whatever that really do help to give areas different feelings. Like the drunk Transistor sections. I don't know if they're like it's halfway between funny and really creepy. I'm not really sure where I land on it, based on the way that the story resolves. But the drunk Transistor stuff really just like spiced up a few areas of the game in a really interesting way.
Yeah, there's a lot of me that thinks this is a game that you're meant to play twice because like the drunk Transistor, that's just what we're going to be calling it now.
Yeah.
Moments, like it's not, you don't actually get an outright explanation as to what's going on there, as far as I know.
Well, the best explanation we have is he's being like disrupted by the spine to an
Yeah.
extent. But then it happens again later, and that doesn't quite add up. It's after you've killed the spine, but then the spine also kind of comes back. So
I think there's another one.
Yeah.
But like kind of either way, it's sort of like that. Like that's a piece you put together. Like it's never outright stated that the spine is what's disrupting it. But again, it was sort of like I was just killing the spine because it was there in front of me the first time I played through. Whereas then, like the second time, knowing that the spine is disrupting Transistor, and then the second time, how close Red is to him. Like it makes the spine fight much more emotionally important the second time through. And I'm almost like, why not have made that clear to us the first time? Like, there's actually a number of points where I'm just like, I don't quite know, unless I missed it. You don't really know that Red is actually close to and in a relationship with the guy in the sword until like the end. Like he's definitely keen on her. You know that the whole way through.
Well, yeah, I kind of got around this part with the drunk Transistors where you start getting like there's more of a backstory between the voice in the Transistor and Red than there first seems, because he's talking about like, oh, our life together and I've been in love with you for a long time and all this stuff, where it'd be kind of weird if it was a sword saying this to a girl that he met that night.
I mean, that was actually
a sword saying this to a girl that he's known for a long time. That's okay.
My theory at this point in the game was that he was a creepy stalker.
Yeah, I kind of get that.
I don't know. Like, it was just that thing where it was kind of like the spine fight meant so much more to me on a recursion, and it was kind of like, well, maybe if they'd made that clearer, it would have mattered more the first time. And like, is it reasonable to expect everyone to recurse? Like, so yeah, I don't know. Like, it's an interesting decision, but like, it's just one of those things where there's a number of times where on the second playthrough, it was like a lot of stuff was making more sense, and I was torn about whether or not that's like a design flaw or like a decision that I just don't agree with.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, we're going to start talking about this in a moment, I guess, but this is part of Transistor's approach to storytelling being, very let you put together the pieces that aren't explicitly important yourself.
I would even say obtuse.
Yeah,
Is a fair
obtuse,
word for it.
depending on how charitable you are, I guess. Because, you do start with Red pulling the sword out of a person, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, it doesn't seem like she has any attachment to that body at the start. She doesn't seem to act like she does, but obviously she does. And that's kind of the piece that we can put together as we get more things about how Transistor seems to have known her for a long time.
Yeah, I was also confused as to whether she had amnesia at the start, just because I didn't know anything and she didn't seem to act like she knew anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. It was like it's a very obtuse story, and like that's the thing. Like the second time through, I was enjoying it. So I didn't actually finish a recursion. I got about maybe halfway through on a second playthrough, just after the spine. And it was just like I was enjoying it a lot more the second time.
Interesting.
And just because I understood more of what was going on.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't finish. I started a recursion, but saw there wasn't much different, and then didn't go on from there.
I was just actually, I'll talk about why I did the recursion in a bit.
Well, should we first? Let's just explicitly say again, this is going to be major spoilers. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you haven't picked that up by now,
sorry.
Yeah, there's spoilers in here, big spoils. So be careful.
Speaking of, let's look at the ending of the game while we're talking about the story.
Wait, what are you doing? Red. Don't you do it. Don't you dare. Don't do this. Please. If you do this. Red, please don't. Wait. Red! Red. No, Red. Did you do? No, Red, no.
He looks like a Pokemon gym leader, doesn't he?
Did you have that thought? He does.
That was my thought when I saw that. I thought he looks like he's straight out of a Pokemon game.
I had not put that together, but I'm 100% on board now that you've said it. Anyway, but yeah, like I mean, first of all, what a moment to end on, like the bit where Red, as soon as she started doing it, and he started going, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh no."
Oh yeah, I know.
And then and like the credits song as well just sells the ending so well, because like we're going to talk about the music a bit more later, but like the whole game has just been sort of Red humming along. I forget the name of the actress who
Ashley something.
Yeah,
Ashley Barrett.
Yeah, she did a great job, and then you just get the credits thing, and suddenly there's like a male voice harmonizing, which was just like such a great.
Yeah, isn't it a great way of representing that theme through the music?
Yeah, like it's such a great. Again, like for considering I didn't know what was happening in the story 90% of the way through, it's very impressive how emotional I still got at the ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the ending was the one part of this game I didn't like.
As in the story part of it, or
the ending of the story. I like this sequence is excellently done. Like the music, the atmosphere, it's all perfectly captured. But just like the way that this resolves the story of the game felt not right to me. I mean, like, because as we're getting up to this point, the Transistor is even talking about how he, has the ability to, he basically turns Red into a god, right? With the ability to do anything. And it seems to me that Red would be able to bring her boyfriend, partner back to life. But what she's basically done is damned him to an eternity of being trapped inside a simulation, while also damning the city because, without her around to like manage it, like, it's not going to happen. So it's just kind of like, I don't know.
The whole
it felt overly poetic instead of fitting in with the kind of the way that the story had been building in a more straightforward way. I don't know.
I mean, I guess the whole thing here is this the world of is it Cloudbank? Is that the city?
That's the city.
Yeah. Like is it virtual? Like, because it's all data, and so like they talk about. One of the things they mention is that like a lot of people are moving to the country, and then we see the happy ending that Red and Swordman get is like, it looks like it's out in the country, like that like the fact that term comes up, and then they're like, there was like a barn in the background, a field. So like, is that it's some sort of afterlife? Like yeah, I don't know. I almost get the impression this is some sort of virtual reality thing, and then when you die, you move down. So it's.
Yeah, maybe. I obviously the first time through up until the very end, my kind of thought was this is a real world in air quotes, but the Transistor is basically a way to interface with that world that is data based, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I went and read the wiki, and here's what the wiki says. I don't know. This is presumably a community wiki, so take this with a grain of salt.
I haven't looked at the wiki yet, so hit me.
But the wiki backs up the idea that, yes, the world is real, and these cities are real cities. Yes, the Transistor is a way of interfacing with, like, it's a data-based interface that can, like, tap into the source code of the universe, so to speak.
Yep.
And the process are AI from another dimension, and that's what they are. And I can't really remember more details than that, but figure it out. Figure the rest out from that. But
it's a very ambiguous story. Perhaps I would argue to a fault, but
I don't know. I don't know if I would go that far, because I do like that. All you really need to know is there's this scientist guy, Bryce, and he's kind of joined this group called the Camarada, and they seem to be sort of political revolutionaries, I would say. And Bryce has kind of figured out, either created or tapped into the process / the Transistor, which controls it. And then you don't really need to know more than that, right? Like, yeah.
I mean, yes. I think this might just be like one of those things. It's very subjective. Like, I like to know all the details. Like, for me, like, getting into the nitty-gritty of world building is something I very much enjoy with stories, and it's very hard to do with Transistor because so much of it is intentionally not explained.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, but I do think it hurts the ending because of what we've already talked about with, like, Red, sending herself to the country, maybe, I don't know, to reunite with her partner doesn't necessarily make sense unless you take one specific read of the story where it is all simulations all the way down, right? And if it's vague, then by many of those vague possible explanations, this is just a bad ending. Like, it just doesn't kind of hold up to its internal structure.
I mean, if we're going with the assumption that Cloudbank is real, then my assumption is the country is some sort of known about afterlife.
Yeah.
And in which case, I mean, doing what Red does here in the ending to be with your loved ones seems like it would be something that happens a lot more often. If there's some sort of idyllic afterlife where you get to be with the people you love.
Maybe the country as an idyllic afterlife only exists inside the Transistor, right?
I mean, yeah, maybe.
I don't know. But you're right. This is the thing that I kind of got a bit frustrated about, to be honest.
Yeah, in
Was
fact,
this-
actually, we've kind of already gone into this. That's the next slide here. Is this is our
yeah,
slide on the story.
yeah.
Um,
Because I really did like the ambiguity and the all of that stuff for the first 95% of the game, right?
yeah,
Because
because it's a
like
mystery that keeps you like interested.
yeah, but then it doesn't like, and if it had ended in a way that allowed that ambiguity to stay intact, perfect, would have been great. But that ending doesn't allow that ambiguity to stay intact, and so it kind of feels like it. I don't know, like if I just forget the last 5% of the game, it makes me more happy with the game.
Yeah. Press N in the chat is sort of talking about their interpretation, which is like somewhat in line with mine, where like Red is, killing herself because she's like the only person left at that point, and she doesn't want to remain separate from Swordman.
But she's got the thing that allows her to change the like if she wants to change her situation to be with Swordman, then just use like she's already demonstrated that she can use the transistor fairly easily.
I think it was I think it's outright stated at one point that she can't like bring him out of the transistor. So I mean, she could make a clone. That's a whole another ethical discussion.
You're right. That is stated, isn't it?
But I'm pretty sure it is stated that she can't get him out, and I don't know if she can bring anyone back. Like we don't actually see her do that. So it might just be that she was alone with the world. She could do whatever she wanted with, but she didn't want to.
Yeah. Sad ending.
Yeah, it's a. But I really liked it. Like it was such an emotionally intense ending for something I didn't quite understand at the time.
Yeah. All right. We can't just talk about the story the whole time.
Yes. I'll play the next clip then.
We got a full house. Ever get the feeling? Yeah. They here for a song. Hello up there. Probably getting his friends.
So just quickly before you start talking about that one, Ruben, I was going to say, I actually forgot there was a button to hum. So I'm really glad you pulled this clip because I totally missed this. I just walked past him and I was like, oh, this is creepy. But it's even creepier if you take into account that they'll dance along with you singing.
Yeah, I kind of read it as applause, but yeah. So this is something really interesting about this game is I think it's built around these moments, and I think that's a very cool thing for it to be doing. The thing I want to talk about here is how kind of linear this game is.
Yep.
And if you have asked the question of why does this clip talk about linearity, the answer is I just want to pull out this clip because I think it's a great moment.
And we couldn't think of a clip for linearity, so
yeah, how do you define
just
linearity?
a good match.
This is something that I've kind of noticed with Pyre especially as well, but also with Bastion, is these games are very story focused, and they kind of explicitly tell the story in the way they want to tell it, and they kind of eschew the idea that games should be about like branching paths. Pyre less so, because in Pyre you can do this interesting thing where the characters that you interact with in the story are the ones that you add to your party. But Bastion and Transistor feel very linear, and I don't know if I want to criticize that or praise it as a way to make compelling stories without needing to build so much stuff,
I personally have just always much preferred more linear games much more linear stories in games. I'm not as much of a fan of like Dragon Age type situations where there's like a million different stories in the world to tell depending on your choices.
No, I get that, but I'm kind of let me compare it to Mario Odyssey. That's the comparison I'm going to make here.
Okay, this
Mario
feels
Odyssey
targeted.
Is not a story-based game, right?
No.
It's a game that's telling a story, but you don't really give a shit about it. But the reason that that game works, the reason that that game is so great in my mind is it's a game that has all these interactions that you can do, and it makes you feel like you're fucking Mario, right? Like it makes you
Right.
feel like you're Mario exploring a world. And in Transistor, I didn't ever feel like I had enough interactions to make me feel like I was actually putting myself into the mind of this character. There are a few things that do. So this clip is an example of one that's quite good. There's one where you get to this like beach shack and you can basically bounce around a volleyball and it doesn't really do anything. It's just a little interaction. And
But
those
it's
things,
sorry, its little metadata is how many times you bounced it as well,
yeah,
which was very
it goes
fun.
up each time, which is great. Or there's one where you you order a pizza earlier in the game and then it comes back later. And those are the things that make a game feel alive to me, that make you feel like you're actually in it because you are experiencing these experiences based on little bits and pieces of interaction. And so it kind of is interesting to me that this doesn't seem to be the way they want to create games because they don't put very many of these kinds of things, or like Transistor doesn't have very many of these kinds of things in it. Mostly it's a very linear structure of go to a new place, possibly, look at a beautifully painted, image while you get some voiceover on top of it. Maybe you get a few like terminals and you'll get some combat. And that's kind of the 98% of the game. And there's very few other little interactions, but that really makes it games feel more alive. And so I really did feel the lack of it in this. Like even from a gameplay perspective, it feels like you're not breaking up the structure enough to keep it fresh, I guess.
Yeah, well, so I suppose to go to your example, or even to pull another one, I've been replaying Uncharted 4 recently, and that's a game where you don't really have any choices, but like in Uncharted, I go and do the things because that's what I want to do. Whereas I do agree in Transistor, it often felt like I was doing the things because this is all I can do.
Yeah, this is what the game wants. Like,
yeah, this is what I have to do,
that,
as opposed to, oh, I want to, go shoot all these guys and climb a tower.
Yeah, in a fair amount of the places, you can't go backwards, right? You can't progress backwards through the game. Once you go through a door, for a number of times, you can't go back through the door again to get backwards. And that's a very simple example, but it's one that takes the game from a world that you're progressing through to a set of scenes that you're watching play out in front of you. And it's a very different feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. There were definitely times where I just felt like I was following along with what I had to do to get to the next part of combat or whatever.
Yeah. 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 I don't know. There are parts that don't feel like that. Like the fact that you get a dog that you can command is great, and I love it, and I wish it would be in every single game. But like without those things, it does feel a little, I guess, not soulless, because this game is full of soul, but like flat is maybe the right word.
Restrictive, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, should we jump into the next thing?
Hell yeah.
Oh, that took a while to load in. Giving you a preview of how we do things behind the scenes. So this is something I want to talk about. I just wanted to talk about the art style in general, and the example I've pulled from this is obviously one of the coolest moments for me is when you come back to the very start of the game, right towards the end, and it's been processed and turned into this. Especially because I have concerns about the choice for like the process art. Like it is just very flat and white, but like this is a great example of how Supergiant was able to use that so effectively anyway. Like the switch to white and red from black and blue is actually really great here, and is making me second guess my statement that I don't like the art style of the process things, because this scene in particular is great.
I agree with you about the designs of the process enemies. Like this game took me about 4 hours maybe, and for about the first 2 hours I couldn't tell apart the enemies. And that's pretty significant. That's half the game where the designs aren't differentiated enough. And it does feel intentional because they are these kind of like white machines, and they're very much like out of this world. Like they're not. I mean, if you trust what the wiki says, they're from a completely different dimension, right? Like they're not meant to gel with the world, but it. I don't know. That when there's a conflict between the artistic side of a game and the mechanical side of a game, that's when when things start to feel frustrating, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think this is the screenshot in the slideshow right now is an example of like when that is very effective in my opinion. Like I think the process art style looks great here, but consistently getting cool and unique designs out of a palette that's essentially white with bits of red is tricky.
Yeah, and I actually feel like that possibly contributed to why I think some of the areas don't feel super differentiated, is because they need to have some of this like backtracking palette that works for it, and so potentially the holistic design doesn't allow for a lot of variance between different places.
Yeah, that's true. Just as an aside though, I did really enjoy the art style. Like this sort of, I don't even know. I don't know enough about art to try and genreify it or anything, but like just the sort of painting-esque nature of it all.
I thought especially the sprites for Red and the Transistor, like the combat sprites, and just you can do this little twirl and you can walk around humming and all this cool stuff. It's very, very emotive. The main character sprite stuff is beautiful, definitely.
Yeah. So just one last thing I want to talk about with the art quickly on this next thing. It's just actually before that plays, I should preface this. I haven't played very many isometric games before, if really any, and I very much struggled to at the start of the game tell what is something I could walk over or interact with and what wasn't. There were definitely a number of times where I couldn't find the exit because I didn't realize that was the path I was able to walk down, as opposed to all the ones that were just like had invisible walls. So this is just a clip that sort of meant to show that. Like, I didn't realize I could walk through that wall there in that clip for about 5 seconds. So I actually tried to knock it down. So yeah, I don't know. That would maybe be again just like a little criticism of the art, in that I think making it clearer what is something I should be focusing on and shouldn't is something I think the game maybe could have done a bit better.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean,
it could just be that I'm shit and new at isometric games.
Maybe. My problem with that though is a flip side, the criticism I would have for this game as well is every single scene transition is going through the exact same door. Like every single scene transition, you walk through the same door, and I think it helped make this game feel a bit samey in its world design. And so I kind of would have liked more variance in it, like it not explicitly telling you, hey, click on this door as much, but maybe those two aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Like I think a clearer language about what you're meant to interact with would allow for you to tweak or play with it a bit more. I think they kind of had to make it obvious and just have the doors, because that was like the only visual language they sort of had for that sort of thing. I'm glad to see I'm actually getting a few people in the comments who are saying they got stuck in the same part. So like, thank you for making me feel like less of an idiot, because I definitely felt like one at that part.
Yeah, fair enough. There's this one part as well where there's like a bunch of these white pillars that you have to get through. And I think that probably is the section that also caused people a bit of trouble. And to talk about it from a gameplay perspective, I think the problem is you do that 3 times maybe in the entire game. You have to break through barriers to continue. I think it's about 3 times you do it in a 4-hour game.
But
and that's just not enough to have it stick in your brain as like, this is a thing I can do.
I think I know the moment you're talking about there. They're sort of down and to the right. And it's such a large and homogenous group of them that I didn't realize they were the kinds of pillars I could break until I accidentally hit one.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a pretty common thing where like it's hard to make it so that you introduce a concept at the start of a game and then have a player remember that they can do it, 3 hours later without having them do it in between. It's basically impossible to do. And that's the trap that Transistor walks into, is teaches you something at the start and then tries to trust that you'll remember it at the end. And no player is going to remember that. Come on.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, another example of that is the humming that you did in that concert. I forgot that you were able to do that.
Oh yeah, I didn't hum. Literally that clip and the first time you learn you can hum are the only times I remembered that humming is a thing, because again, it just doesn't come up, right? Like you don't. Yeah. If you don't explicitly establish it as a thing you can do enough times, players just don't get it, Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
I have stories of, this is maybe a bit of a tangent, but whatever. I have stories of, because one of the first games that I worked on was like explicitly a puzzle game, and we had to, the design of it was so interesting because we would teach the player, the first world, as it was teaching the player all the things they can do. And then as you progress through the game, you have to kind of reincorporate those tricks that you've learned in the first world. And then each level of the first world is a new trick that you can learn, and they kind of get reincorporated. And there are some of the tricks that you can learn that don't get reincorporated for like 2 or 3 worlds. And then players would just get stuck until and when we were doing playtesting, I would say, hey, remember you did that thing? And they'd be like, oh yeah, I can do that thing. Or they'll kind of get stuck. Something that players do a lot is once you find a rut, you just exist in that rut until something forces you to break it. And so this will apply in Transistor because for me, once I picked functions that I liked, I didn't change them.
Yeah, I've got a slide on that later.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. And I think Transistor falls into the same trap that we did when we were working on this game, which is that if you don't explicitly break the rut for players enough, they will just get stuck when you ask them to break the rut eventually. And it is just such a frustrating experience for the player.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's that old thing. Like, players will optimize the fun out of a game if they can.
Yes, exactly.
And it's a bit of an example of that.
Yeah.
At least in Transistor.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's play the next clip, and we'll talk about this briefly. This is talking about the music.
Side street due east. Through there. I think I know a place we could get a ride.
Oh, damn, that music is so good. Hey, Kaz. That's just a random clip of a part of the game. And I mean, it's all like that, right? Spine of the World is a great song. I think it's my favorite song in the entire thing, but just, man, the whole soundtrack is so good.
I mean, yeah, it really is. I've been listening to it at work for the last week on Spotify. It's great. The one exception, I hate the sandbox song, like the beach song. And unfortunately, that is the one I had to listen to the most because I spent so long in all the challenge rooms. But apart from it, they're all great.
That one, like, it's fine. I think it's fine. Nah. I mean, it's not I love Spine of the World. All the songs with the vocalizations I think are really good because Ashley Barrett's great. But I don't know why Sandbox is the one explicitly that you dislike.
I think partially because I had to listen to it the most because it was the one playing in all the challenge rooms. But secondly, like, it's just...
Wait, did you change... You get, like, the record player, right?
I mean, does that... I figured that just changed it in the sandbox. No.
Yeah, but if you're changing it in the...
does that apply to the rooms as well?
Because you listen to it too much. Just change the song, man.
I didn't realize that would have that would affect it in the rooms as well.
Anyway.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's still... I didn't like it the first time anyway. I don't know what it is. I didn't like that song.
I think it's good. I mean, we should call out Darren Korb, who is the composer who worked on Bastion and worked on it with his friend Ashley Barrett. And then obviously Supergiant loved the work he did and were like, hey, do it for this. And he did. And this game has won a number of awards just because the music is so good. Like, actually, of the technical aspects of this game, and we're going to talk about the innovative gameplay, which I think is great as well, but of the technical aspects of this game, I think the music is the one that is the best. It just is genuinely incredible.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone in chat is just making fun of me for
Yeah, deservedly.
Yeah, it's just annoying as well because the way you unlock the songs is doing the challenges. So what I was doing is sitting there doing the challenges, hating the song, progressively unlocking more and more better ones that I could use and just not using them.
Song. Oh, I wish I could listen to this instead of the one that
I did have that thought. I didn't think it would apply to anything more than that room. Anyway, yeah, overall, music was great.
Yeah, Spine of the World, great song.
And sort of related to the music, we have the voice acting.
Hey, end of the plaza. It's you. I'm so sorry, Red. They took your voice. I couldn't stop them. But we took something of theirs. Hey, let's just go. Damn. Young lady here to see you.
Yeah, again, Logan Cunningham voiced the narrator in Bastion, and they loved him so much they brought him back for this, and it was the right decision.
I mean, he's great. Yeah, he is. Especially like his voice. I don't know what Bastion's like, but it very much suits the sort of noir vibes that you get for what. In fact, it may not even be. This game may not be that noir. It might just be kind of dark, and I've called it noir because of his voice.
So in Bastion, it's he's like a grizzled cowboy kind of voice.
Yeah, okay.
Very, like not hugely different because it's still a kind of grizzled male voice kind of vibe, but different enough that you can tell he's got range.
Yeah.
Great. Again, technically great stuff. No complaints here. Loved it.
Yeah. I thought the voice acting was all great. Having so many of the songs be hummed as well when that's all Red can do, it's like a great little detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about this game for a long time. We haven't actually touched on the game yet. So let's talk about the gameplay bits, shall we?
Saving the most important bit for last, I think, which is, let's actually talk about the gameplay.
Time to dance. Dug in their heels this time. Cheerleaders psyching them up. Now.
I see you have a very similar strategy to me, which is summon the help and then do everything else.
Yeah, first step is always summon your dog and work from there. This clip is kind of just showing off. I mean, when I say gameplay, obviously we're talking about the combat because there isn't that much to talk about outside of that. Where you're just kind of walking around. But the thing I guess I want to start with is the idea of like this kind of semi-turn-based combat.
Yes,
it's great. I love it.
It's interesting because I found myself alternating. One of the things I did was get something that the game tries to tell you but is a lie is that there's other functions apart from crash. And
you did the exact thing that we were talking about before, where you found something that worked for you and you never changed it, even when you could have to make it better.
No, I forced myself to in the second half of the game because I was only using crash and help, and then maybe I had I forget which one of the ranged ones equipped with the heart shape.
Oh yeah, I had a laser beam with a heart on it too.
Just so if I was feeling overwhelmed, I could turn some enemies onto my side from a distance. But yeah, like there was one point where I got crash and gave it the ability to still be usable when I was recharging. And then I also and then I also had the ability for it to be really fast and basically instant. And what I found is that I was actually doing more damage out of turn than in it. And in fact, there were a few battles where I didn't enter turn at all. Some of the challenges as well. I just ran around crashing everyone because I also had some stun effects going on, and it was just like it was interesting how there was so much flexibility to the thing that like I was almost just kind of able to throw away the whole point of it at one point.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, optimizing the fun out of the game. Well, I don't know. Maybe if you find a way that works for you, why not use it, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did change it up. There was another time where I had help, and I
Mm,
put the sparks, I think it was on it, the duplicator one. So I was
mm,
getting two dogs.
yeah.
And at that point, I'd basically turned the game into like Mario versus Rabbids or XCOM, like because
Yeah.
I also had all these passive effects boosting how much I got in turn and so like
Nice.
it was taking me about 5 minutes to plan a turn because I had so much I could do.
Mm,
So like again, there was so much variety here, and honestly, the most upsetting thing about it to me was that I had to usually force myself to find it. I think I could have played through the whole game using only Crash if I wanted to.
yeah. It's interesting. I think, about the first half of the game, the combat didn't quite click for me. And I found myself doing a thing where I would like use my turn and then basically the way that it ended up being was use my turn and then just kind of hide for 3 or 4 seconds
Yeah,
and then use
or
my turn and
hide
hide.
slash run. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it took me a while to actually get more into the flow of like planning things out and being like, okay, go over here, charm, I don't know the word for it, charm this person to my side, crash that one, send my dog onto that one, execute that, then walk over here. And then by that time, I'll have it back up again. And I can do this, I can do that. It took me a while to get into that mindset and not just be like either running around or running into enemies and almost dying. And yeah, I think it actually was when I got help. Using help was what opened up the game for me because it made it
Yep.
a bit more strategic with having another unit to control. I think that's really what helped me get into the combat, which I just didn't get into for the first hour.
I absolutely agree. Like, I never went back from the time I figured out I could have the two dogs because
Mm,
that just like, yeah, again, it kind of turned it into like a more XCOM Mario versus Rabbids style game, and I found myself enjoying that a lot more. Like, I think this is so interesting. Like yeah, the concept of hybrid real time turn based was fascinating. I think I'm glad that it was a 5 hour long game that it was
mm.
included in. Like I
Yeah,
think,
true. It would have started to get a bit too
yeah,
repetitive.
I think this is an interesting system that could very easily outstay its welcome, and I'm glad that it was only used in a game that was this long.
Well, this is the thing. Like, this is the thing that I really like about Supergiant is they make weird combat or weird like core mechanic systems like this. I don't know if you've played Pyre, Elliot, but it's basically a medieval fantasy football game where the core mechanic of it is you're playing 3v3 soccer, basically.
Okay.
And it's about as different to regular turn-based combat as it's about as different to like a regular soccer game as Transistor is to regular turn-based combat, right? Like it's
Okay.
very much innovative in a lot of interesting ways, and I really like the niche that Supergiant has carved for themselves of, relatively short, 4 to 6 hour, highly story-based, innovative core mechanic game. Because even if you don't fully get the mechanic, you can still get through a 4 to 4 hour game without fully getting into it, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I think it's a really cool like place for them to be.
Yes. I think what so there were a few times where I got overloaded, which is when you lose your health and then you lose one of your slots.
It was always the dog for me.
Yeah, same. And it's because the game told me about 95% of the way through that the way it decides it is which one's the most expensive. And I always
Oh,
had, and
interesting.
I always had everything loaded onto help, and help was expensive in and of itself.
Uh,
Um,
this
but
is interesting. I had this weird thing of I didn't the sorry, I'll let you finish first because I feel like I'm about to take us into the next slide. So
yeah, okay.
why don't you finish your progress?
Well, so all I wanted to say is that was like the one point where like most of my experimenting with completely different play styles came from when I lost help or when I lost Crash.
Yeah,
Like, so the
definitely.
reason I really discovered help was because I lost Crash one time and I was like, wait, shit, I'm actually going to have to think now. And it's almost like that only happened to me. I think there were 3 points in the game where I got overloaded, and one
Yep.
of those was double overloaded.
Mm,
And it's almost like I kind of wish it was happening more often, because I had so much fun, like, completely redesigning my build from the ground up and discovering completely new combos. And the challenge rooms helped with a bunch of that as well, and we'll get there. But I almost wish I'd been getting hurt more often, because there's so much more to this game's combat than I've experienced even now.
Yeah.
And it's way too easy to get into a routine.
I guess, well, let's play the next clip, because the next thing I want to talk about is like the curve of difficulty for the combat, I think.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going with this.
Oh my gosh. So, it would happen to me a lot where I would be doing a fight, and basically I would make one mistake and my health would go from 90% to 5% like this, and then I would suddenly have to change completely what I was doing. I actually got overloaded in this fight. I fucked it up.
Yeah.
But I didn't bother to pull the whole clip. It's so weird. It's like, I agree 100% with what you said, that the fact that you can get overloaded is really interesting and really would add more if it happened more. And I also feel like the main combat like didn't quite work. So I wish it had been more, I don't know, like get you overloaded more quickly, but not kill you as quickly. I don't know the exact wording I'm trying to land on there. But
yeah, I think for me,
that balance.
There was a mental like switch I had to flip for not seeing overloading as dying.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Because like the first time it happened to me, I was like devastated, and I was like, this has set me back. And then that was when I discovered my double help combo and like started to enjoy the game on a whole new level. So then when I got double overloaded by the spine, it was like, by that point it was like, oh, this is an opportunity to come at the game from a completely different angle. And I don't think, like, if for whatever reason I hadn't been quite as successful in discovering a whole new strategy that second time, I may not have made that leap, and I would have like hated ever being overloaded.
Yeah.
And there was actually one fight right before the final boss battle. Like I could tell I was right about to get to the final fight, and I was like, well, now is not the time for me to come up with new strategies. So I entered this fight against a couple of the man things. It stuffed up my initial play, and as you said, like you just get absolutely punished for a simple mistake. I got double overloaded, and so I just hit retry because I was like, no, this is not. I'm not going into the final boss battle without help and without crash. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not doing it.
Mate, I don't want to get into the concept of backseat game designing here, but I feel like I would have enjoyed it more if, instead of having a health bar at all, you know, when you take damage, you get maybe 3 seconds of invincibility and you lose a function. And it starts with the ones that upgrade your abilities, but if you take damage 5 or 6 times in a fight, you start losing the actual core functions that allow you to do the moves. And so it kind of, it's the upgrades that you lose first, but then the more damage you take, the more things get overloaded, and we take away the health completely. And it's just like, so then your functions more explicitly become your health, and you don't see it as death is, as soon as I lose any functions, that's a version of death. We got a comment in the channel that a user called Toby says, when I got overloaded, I just reloaded. And that's kind of speaking to what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
When you run out of health, you feel like you've lost, but it shouldn't feel like that, because it actually, overloading functions builds the game into a more interesting thing. And so I feel like that should have been a bigger part of it.
My experience with this game would have been significantly worse if I hadn't overloaded in that early point, because I wouldn't have discovered the strength of it. I agree. Something to directly connect how much you're using something with like the damage you're taking. Like, you know, if it was like, you know, this obviously would need refinement. It's not a usable system, but when you take damage, if it applied directly to the functions you've been using the most, so they're the first ones to die.
Yeah.
Like, and then if it was framed more as them like breaking, and so it's like you've got to put something else in for now, I think that would just maybe help with the framing of it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I don't want to, like, the thing to keep in mind here is this is an indie team, and so
Oh yeah.
they're never going to have a thing that's as polished to some of the games that we've been comparing them to today.
I
So I
mean,
don't know if that's
you know,
a fair comparison, but
no, I
it
mean,
is what it is.
it's all this stuff. I think we're just talking about what might have made the game better for us, but it's like it's better than anything I've made, like obviously. So it's like
Yeah, I could agree with that.
yeah, any sort of criticism or complaint or whatever that is in any of these game clubs is just coming from a like spitballing, brainstorming type perspective is
Yeah.
how I'd frame it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
So to move on to just a bit of the next one, just the last thing I want to talk about with the sort of combat is, oh, sorry. I actually don't know why I bothered including that clip. It's really this screenshot that I want to talk about. The idea, so here we've got like these are all the functions I sort of had by the end of my first playthrough, and what I love is just the concept of like, so here I'm focused on get, and you can see get is its function is magnetic / rearranging, and all of them have these 2-word descriptions. And I love this as a way because each function can be used either in the active, the upgrade, or the passive slots. And you can kind of predict what each one is going to do because they've got this word association thing. Like, I just love this as a concept, and it's not wholly unique. I've seen similar things before, but this is maybe one of the best examples where it's like knowing, okay, so get is all about moving things and drawing them in would instantly start to get me to think about the combos rather than just kind of in other games that have let you build combos in this way. It's more, I will load up a function that I like, and then I will go through like every possible combination and just read what they do and maybe not understand it. And like, we talked about this with Hollow Knight a bit, actually. Like, there were the combinations of the little badge things in Hollow Knight.
Yeah.
And like, there were tons of combinations that like were not explicit and weren't clear to me. Whereas in this one, I would start to be like, okay, so I got get, and it brings things closer. And so I'd already be thinking, okay, well, how's that going to interact with like bounce or help or any of these other ones?
Yeah, they really did get a lot out of the programming allegories, metaphors, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the programming theme.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost like not a programming theme, because this is much more like symbolic. Like each of these things represent something symbolically. I'm trying very hard not to relate it to the Otherverse stuff right now, but that's actually more where I see it fitting in. Like, it's each one of these represents a concept, and that fills in how it relates to all the others in all the various combinations and slots.
Yeah, fair enough. The function system and the how open-ended it was, I think, just is incredibly awesome. Like, choose your abilities, choose the kind of modifiers on these abilities, choose your passive effects, like all kinds of things that really just are. It's like such a cool way to build out a system. It felt very open-ended in a very awesome way.
Yeah, well, and so to compare it to the limiters, like the limiters always felt so separate to me, because it was like, here are like explicit sort of disadvantages you get from each one. And that's usually what these sorts of systems are like, where you have abilities and then you have like modifiers, and they're different sets of stuff. I loved that they managed to use the same sets of things and just build this concept thing to use them for all that. And I kind of wish they'd tried to extend it to limiters. Like, if each one of these could have represented a limiter and you had limiter slots, I reckon that would have been awesome.
Yeah, or even just more explicitly tie the limiters into your functions. Like, you have a limiter that's like, enemies take 15% less damage, and you have to explicitly put that on one of your functions, maybe.
Did you
use limiters much?
In the sense that as soon as I got one, I would turn it on and leave it on. Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you played with all of the limiters fully?
Yeah. Well, it just made me much more careful about which ones I picked. The exception was I actually turned them all right off before the final boss fight, and I think we're going to talk about that, but I don't know. Yeah, we'll talk about that, but I found that boss fight incredibly easy because I'd been playing the whole game with about 16% worth of limiters, and I turned them all off for the boss fight, and then it was suddenly like, oh, this guy's nothing.
I didn't turn on any limiters until about halfway through, and then I turned them all on, and then I played that for like 30 minutes, and then I was like, nah, I'm just gonna turn them back off again.
I mean, it was easy to sell them to me because it was like, hey, you get more experience for using them, and I was like, okay,
Yeah, my thought was like, and this comes back to the linearity of the game. I didn't care about experience at all. I was just kind of like, I do not give a shit about experience. Like what
I
I
mean, just
just what do I get? Nothing,
what
right?
level? What level were you at when you finished the game? Do you
I
know?
don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
9. Does
yeah.
that feel right?
Well, I was at like 13,
Okay, yeah,
which is sort of
probably
yeah,
correct then. And I was
yeah,
at the point where, like, I didn't have enough memory to start doing to fill out my slots, and
yeah.
so I was kind of like, I got memory one time over those 9 levels, and so I was like, I don't like all I get from more experience is more slots that I can't use anyway, so I don't really care.
Yeah, I definitely, whenever I had the option to get more memory as one of my upgrade things, I did it because it was
Yeah,
like, they're like, oh, you can get another upgrade slot, and it's like, I already have more functions than memory. Like, I need the
yeah,
memory. Um,
exactly.
I don't know. It was interesting. I definitely, I was focusing so much on getting the experience and leveling up because I always wanted to get more functions to add to my arsenal. But at the same time, I will say the ones that I got later on are definitely the ones I kind of used the least because I understood
Yeah,
them less.
yeah, and yeah, I got all the same functions you did, right? I
I
don't
think,
think you have any functions that I didn't get.
well, I mean, there was only one I didn't have at this point. I'm pretty sure, because it started recycling the ones it was offering to me by about
Yeah.
level 8.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that was the point where I was kind of like, I don't like, what's the point of experience to me? Like, it's getting me something that I don't even need, you
Yeah,
know?
that's fair.
I
I
don't
thought the
know.
limiters were fun as well. Like the game was probably significantly harder for me at times uh, than it
Yeah,
was for you.
true. Yeah.
Um, with the exception of that boss fight, like the boss fight felt like such a weird curve to me because I created this artificially high one and then just took it away from myself right at the end.
Let's move on. We'll talk about the boss fight in a second.
Yeah. Oh, this is another one of mine. This is me. Oh, actually, oh god, I'm going to turn that one down. That music is awful at 600 times. So this is one of the, I think it was the speed challenge rooms where I had to beat this guy in one turn. So you can sort of see me trying to figure out how to do such a thing with the set amount of functions they gave me. And here's me eventually figuring it out.
Scratch that. We're done.
Yay.
And like I mostly have brought this up because first of all, fuck that music. Second of all, the practice rooms were probably my favorite part of the game
Mm.
because like, and again, like I've already compared this. This is maybe a comparison that's not going to work on most people. I don't know how popular this game was, but like Mario versus Rabbids was like this XCOM style game, but it was the same thing where they dump you in a level, and there was kind of an intended strategy.
Yeah.
And this is very much, it reminds me of the puzzle mode from that, where it would drop me into a room with a challenge, and it would allocate which functions I had access to, and I learnt about half of my cool combos in these practice rooms because it would, by taking away the rest of my items and functions, they forced me to actually learn to use the ones I'm not normally using. So like in that one, I sort of learnt about how Crash makes targets vulnerable for breach, which is something I hadn't learnt yet, despite having used both functions excessively.
Mm.
There were some other ones that like taught me a bit. Yeah, I don't know. Like I thought I learnt the most in those ones, and also had the most fun kind of treating the combat as a puzzle. Like I think that enhanced that kind of issue we've talked about with the combat, where sometimes it just felt like you were being punished. When it felt like it was a puzzle with a solution, it was more fun to iterate and lose it, and then be like, okay, well, what I maybe need to try is this.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. I feel bad. I did some of the sandbox stuff, but I got I I think I was at that point of the game where I was like, okay, I just want to know how this story continues. And then I was like, all right, I'll get back to this later. And then I never did. So,
Yes. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. For me, I'm one of those people who goes off and does all the side quests. I don't necessarily get it as attached to the stories as they're ongoing. So I was just like, I was constantly doing all these challenges. And I think they were my favorite part of the gameplay.
yeah.
I definitely recommend you try and find the time to go back and do them because they're actually very fun.
Fair enough. Yeah, I get what you mean though. I had the same experience with Mario versus Rabbids, where it was like the main game was pretty fun, but actually doing the puzzles was more fun because it felt like that I knew I could get the right answer.
Yeah, and it was about like experimenting. Like I think the problem with the campaigns in these games is it just feels shit when you are like losing because you feel like you're beginning to be punished for it down the road.
It
Whereas
feels
with
like
the puzzle,
yeah.
Whereas with the puzzle, it's like okay, now like just try again. Like it's that iterative nature of it.
Yeah, cool. Should we talk about the final boss?
Yeah, I'll play the clip you've got here first.
Who gets to go first? How about me?
This blew me away the first time. I was like, oh fuck, this just got real.
Isn't it cool?
And I was like, this is unfair. He can't just attack me while I can't move. And then I realized what a hypocrite I was.
What a good final boss fight this was. The idea of suddenly you're fighting someone who can do the thing you've abused to beat all the process the entire time. What a great idea for a final boss.
And especially because, and then once I got through his health, then he got it all back and he just overloaded, like he just lost one of his functions.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, so it's unfair. I was like, I'm fighting myself. Like, yeah, exactly. That moment of like the first 10 seconds thinking this isn't fair to then realizing, oh God, I'm so full of shit.
What I've been doing. Yeah, exactly. It's such a good way of showing you how much of a crutch you've been given and completely turning it against you. Because my strategy for sometimes had been to run away and wait until my thing recharged.
Yeah.
And if I did that, if I just ran away and waited, he would pop turn and just walk up to me and smack me, and I couldn't do anything about it.
I had the same thing. At this stage in the game, I had been using this tactic that kind of involved actually waiting for about 5 to 10 seconds between popping my turns. And I got so punished for it at the start of this fight because what he was getting to do was do 2 turns for every one of mine.
Yeah,
and
I had the exact same experience.
And I had to completely change my tactic, which again, highlight of this game is when it forces you to completely throw out everything you've got.
Definitely.
I think, this might actually be one of my favorite boss fights, like ever, just because it's simultaneously, like, I think the problem a lot of boss fights run into is they need to challenge you in a new epic way, but they also need to not completely throw out everything you've been learning. Like, Sonic the Hedgehog games are terrible for the final boss fight, just playing completely different to the entire rest of the game. So it's kind of like, well, it undermines the epicness of it because it's not gameplay I've been practicing.
I haven't learned this. It's just a completely new thing that you're teaching me.
Yeah, whereas like other games, it can just feel like I'm doing like the same thing but bigger. This is like just completely throwing the core mechanic on its head while at the same time in a way that I instantly was like, okay, I know what he can do.
Yeah.
Like that was so much fun.
What a cool idea.
Yeah, this might be one of the best final bosses I've ever seen. Absolutely blew me away. And yeah.
Cool. What else? We've been talking about Transistor for a while. It's a game that I think has a lot of really strong merits and a lot of things that just felt slightly frustrating.
I thought it was a great one to talk about in this format, honestly. Like
it lends itself to discussion quite nicely, doesn't it?
And I think I've come away, the more I've thought about it, like putting these slides together and talking about it here with everyone, the more I've done that, the more I'm like, I'm enjoying this. Like I'm looking back on it with a better opinion.
Well, regardless of whether you liked parts of it or not, it's impossible to not argue that, one, it was very well made, and two, it took some very interesting, like, mechanical kind of risks.
Yeah.
Which, if the game has those two things, like, I don't give a shit what I thought about it. Like, it's worthy of a long discussion,
Yeah, I agree. And considering, I think most of my like complaints about the game with regard to things being obtuse and like not necessarily clear at the start. So talking about it like this, like we work through those problems, and so where I'm like I'm more comfortable like talking about it and thinking about it.
And I don't even know if they're problems so much as they are decisions, right? Like
Oh
that's
yeah,
the thing
yeah,
that I like about this game is everything that I had a problem with was intentionally decided, and
yeah,
that kind of takes the sting out of it because it's like this is the thing that that whoever I've forgotten the name of one of the founders of Supergiant, but this is the story that they want to tell in the way that they want to tell it, and that's
yeah,
just a very disarming. Like you can't hate on that, right? You can't hate on
yeah.
creative people creating in their own way.
Yeah, yeah, that's completely fair. Like there is a difference between thinking this is not good versus this is a decision I agree I
Yes,
disagree with. And I think
yes,
most of the issues I have with Transistor are decisions I maybe don't necessarily agree with, rather than
yeah,
like the game has not done what it wants to do.
yeah. A very good game, one that I've very
Yeah.
much liked playing and discussing.
Yeah,
For
I'm very glad we did this for the Game Club because I think I would have enjoyed this a lot less if we weren't
yeah,
like having
totally.
to think about it and talk about it in this way.
I think it's a game that goes to show that critical examination of the games that you play does have merit in deepening your enjoyment of them, right?
Yeah.
Like this is a game that is better when you think about it more and when you examine your own feelings towards it. And that's the kind of games that we should be talking about here. So
Yeah, completely agree.
cool. Now,
Um,
should we get into our discussion question, Elliot, from
yeah,
last time?
let's talk about the discussion question. So the discussion question we asked at the end of the last club meeting was which video game has your favorite audio design?
Hmm. We got a
Um,
few answers to this. We got an answer from Kipos, who talks about Warhammer 40k Mechanicus.
oh yeah.
What a Warhammer 40k sounding game. Yeah, name, sorry, I should say. Yes, just the sound design. Kipos talks about the amazing sound design. And I think science fiction-y mechanical sound design can be really captivating. These kind of like echoing metallic clangs that ring out throughout soundscapes and stuff. I think always just is beautiful. And
Yeah.
Kipos has included a video link, which if you're on the Discord, you can request.
Yeah. Like I think I was into Warhammer 40k for a bit as a teen, and there's this interesting mix of like sci-fi and sort of religious imagery, particularly built into the Space Marines, which are usually the protagonists of the games.
Yeah.
And like that's what Kipos talked about here. Like there's this weird mix of like big deep bass that's like very common in sci-fi these days with like the hymns,
Mm,
which feels very Space Marines to me. So even though I haven't played this game, I can already kind of picture what Kipos is talking about, and like I can see why it would be great.
yeah.
We also we've kind of picked out just people chatting in our Discord channel for some of the answers. So I wanted to highlight Wildbow was talking about Celeste, which like, and I mostly pulled this because I completely agree. Like the music in the game is absolutely fantastic and captures like Celeste is one of those games that's built from the ground up with a vision of a tone in mind and absolutely pulls it off.
Mm,
But just like the sound effects that are included in the game are also great. And what I loved about this is Wildbow has just included in their answer like oh, the almost answer of the when you interact with a golden feather. What was funny is I immediately pictured the exact tone, and like then they've said like the poomph oomph when you hit the electric bumpers, and I just heard that sound. Like, and I think that's a testament to how good the sound effects are in the game. Was that like Wildbow can just write and I instantly pictured the exact sound the Thwomps make when they do that.
yeah, I guess that's a very strong marker. Is if you can translate text to sound effects in your head, you know it's worked on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Peter Enigma talks about Mass Effect and how it invented the what do you is there a word for this? The droning sound effect that's used at the start of every movie trailer, or was for a few solid years at
I've
least.
always called it like the Inception blah because I feel like
Yeah,
Inception was
yeah,
really the one that made it like Hollywood's go-to.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And we got some chat in the Discord from Spinner Shroom talking about Elite Dangerous, and this was a bit of a back and forth conversation. So Hero of Old Iron also jumped in with talking about the sound profiles for ships and how ships have their own like soundscapes that they adhere to.
Yeah, it was interesting. I haven't played that game, but I was like, what I really liked was this idea that each kind of I think their spaceships like had different sounds associated with how they fly. So like the straining whine for some versus like the jet sounds of others. I thought that sounded really cool.
Yeah. What's going to be our discussion question for next month, Elliot?
So I think for next month we're going to not do discussion questions again, because most of the answers we got here were because a couple of days ago we were like, so does anyone remember the discussion question? And the answer was kind of a no. What we do, like what we already have here, is we have like a Q&A section in here, which obviously the book club does as well. And I mean, for those of you who are here, I think we'll just, whatever was going to be covered in the discussion question, we'll just sort of do in the Q&A.
Yep. Who's got some cues that they want us to A?
Yeah, so speaking of, it's our Q&A now. So any other questions or comments on Transistor?
I'm taking my more relaxed pose because this is the more relaxed part of the show.
What we might do is we'll come into the Q&A with a bit of a discussion question type thing in mind to, have people get on board.
Kyrgyzstan's already got a question here, and it's going to start me on the warpath here, which is... they're asking, can we talk about the UI for modifying your functions? I found it frustrating. I am so on board with this. The amount of times when I wanted to add a function as like a supporting function to something else, and I would start by clicking on the button to make it a passive, and I was like, no, wait, that's not right. And then I'd click on the button that's show more information about it, and then I was no, that's not right. Almost always, it would be the fourth button I would click of the 4 possible buttons that you can click. Which just every time it happened.
Sorry, just quickly. Somebody's mentioned we missed their answer on Discord. So, sorry, Zach, we didn't miss you talk about Skyrim.
For the Q&A, their question was, did you miss our Discord answer? The answer is yes, we did. So good question, Zach. Thanks for
yes. So I haven't played Skyrim, so I can't talk to the music in it. But yes, I'm sure it's great. Sorry. About missing that. To answer the question about the UI stuff, you played on keyboard, right?
Yes, I did.
Because I played on controller, and it was the dusty old Xbox controller I bought for PC games a couple of years ago that I've never used because I don't play on PC. And so first of all, I kept getting confused because X, Y, A, and B are on different positions on the Xbox to where they are on the Switch. And so I kept thinking in my head I want to press X and then pushing the wrong button. But
interesting, yeah.
The interface kept catching me because what I kept wanting to do was say I wanted to put help on the X button, I would push X, but that was something to do something different. And it was just driving me up the wall in that regard. But apart from that, I didn't think it was too bad, an interface.
Again, I think the fact that this game is only 4 hours long works in its favor here, where it's just like the minor frustrations that you have with things like interface really do build up if you were doing it more. But because it's only a 4 hour game, you just don't get the chance to get frustrated enough with it,
Yeah, fair. No, it could have been maybe a bit more streamlined, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. What else are we talking about? People are now just talking about how you haven't even played Skyrim and you should be ashamed of yourself. And you should, Elliot. And I can say that with authority because I also haven't played Skyrim.
The weird thing, I think I own like 3 copies because everyone's constantly giving it away.
I own a few copies of Skyrim too. I've just never played it.
Yeah.
Get out of here, fly.
I it's not for lack of trying on Bethesda's part.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's literally on every single device I own. I just haven't ever bothered.
Yeah.
To bring up Zach's answer, they're talking about how in Skyrim, one of the core mechanics is shouts. You kind of do magical shouts. And so the idea of sonic-based magic kind of weaves itself into the the audio design and the soundtrack is also very good.
Yeah, I think I've heard bits and pieces of the soundtrack, and it's that same sort of like, I mean, my go-to for everything is Zelda. That's my favorite franchise ever. I'll talk about each of the games for days. And it's that same sort of like classical fantasy soundtrack, I'm pretty sure. And again, Zelda's one where music is integrated into the gameplay in a lot of the games, and that makes it more important, like that the music be good, and I think it often is. So I imagine a lot of the sentiment around the Skyrim soundtrack is probably very similar to what I'd say about Zelda ones.
Yeah. What other questions have we got? Any other questions? I remember there was a period of time right after Skyrim came out when that one Skyrim song that I'm trying to think of what it is, but I can't remember what it's called. But it was like played everywhere at all the Games Awards shows as like the, hey, video games can have good songs too song. So I guess that's good.
Yeah. It's funny. Prof Deadpool in our comments has just brought up that on average a person owns 1.3 copies of Skyrim, which sounds about right.
It's the average amount of Skyrim per household.
It's interesting. Like people talking about Bethesda in general. Like I've actually never played any Bethesda games, and I should at some point, because something I've heard and seen a lot about, like even on Monster Factory, like they use this same custom engine for all their games, and it seems like just a pile of dog shit in some ways for glitches, and I kind of want to get my hands into that because it looks like fun.
Yeah. We got a question from Metathulu in chat talking about how I mentioned about thinking of this game in the context of other Supergiant games. Care to expand on that? We kind of touched on it lightly, but the thing I really wanted to talk about was the thread of Bastion being their first game and having this moment of, one, setting up all of the tropes or themes that we would see throughout all their games, like Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett and Logan Cunningham, right?
I don't know if those are themes as much as people, but yeah.
Whatever, just people that they seem to like working with and presumably incorporate into their design process so that they'll get to work with them more. But thinking about Bastion as the first game, Bastion was a game that, because it was their first game, I had thoughts in my head about, like, they did it, like, it's got the same thing where we talked about in Transistor where it feels kind of linear, right? Yep. And I remember thinking of that at the time as like, well, it's their first game, so, it's fine.
Yeah.
But then thinking about that in terms of Transistor and how they more actively stepped towards it, even though presumably they made enough money off Bastion, they could go in whatever creative direction they wanted. And
I tend to assume a second game by a developer has significantly more freedom than a first, because like, you're not scrounging for cash as much.
Yeah, assuming their first game was as much of a success as Bastion was. Like, Bastion was the indie darling game for a period of time.
Sure.
And then Pyre, which I've also played, but although I didn't play it until I played it before Transistor, is really interesting, where it also feels like it has this kind of weirdly linear thing, and the same idea as Transistor of a weird core mechanic wrapped in a game that functionally is linear to tell a specific story. I haven't finished Pyre. I bounced about halfway through, but that's the vibe I definitely got from it. So thinking about it in context, it's interesting the trend that Supergiant has gone down of that specific type of game. And the other thing is, I didn't know this, but looking in chat, it seems like Hades completely breaks that mold. Like, Hades is a more roguelike style game, which presumably in my head immediately says to me that it's a lot more about doing multiple replays, about, doing all the kinds of things that roguelikes have that mean that they're not linear story-based games, basically. So maybe it took them 3 games to really explore the stories that they wanted to tell, and now that we get into their 4th game, they're like, all right, let's try something completely different. That makes me very interested to see what Hades is like and what themes of other Supergiant games are going to be maintained across it.
Yeah, I think, like, I remember Hades took off on our Discord, like, almost 6 months ago, I think. And everyone was playing it for a while. And it seemed roguelike, although I think there was people, I just remember people going like absolutely bananas when like a character was added as a baddie, or I don't even know, but like, the concept like more gods were being added. Like, I think it's tapping into Greek mythology a lot. So like, I think it's maybe just a very different method of storytelling, but I definitely got the impression people seem to care so much about the characters and their personalities in the game. There's still some of that stuff there.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll come up in a future game club. Who knows? What else? What else should we talk about? Any other questions from people? People are talking about Hades a bit more. So based on just an earlier clarification, it's now in alpha, right? It's in open or some kind of early access alpha, so you can play it, but it's not fully released. And I saw an interesting comment. I think it was Toby in our chat who said it. I'm not sure. It was a while back. That one of the problems with Transistor is it feels like it needed a bit more playtesting love, and now Hades is in early access, which means that it will get that exact thing, which is good. They've got the space to do that with this game now, which means it will presumably lead to a much better game.
Yeah, to get a bit more meta for a bit, the concept of early access is still so interesting to me in the way it's been treated differently by different developers. Like, there are games that have been sitting in early access for bloody 3 years now that are essentially fully playable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know how to feel about it all the time, but for playtesting and sort of helping to develop the game, I think it's a really interesting strategy.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I guess we'll wrap it up, right?
Yeah, unless anybody has any last questions.
Final questions, pop them in now. Yeah, we've got people talking about roguelikes and whether they like them or not. Roguelikes are great. I love a good roguelike.
I think we were talking about this before. I don't think I've ever played a roguelike. We're talking about
you should play. Well, yeah, okay. I guess we're gonna. Well, in a moment we'll solve that problem.
Yeah, exactly. Gonna get through that because we are. I'm just going to cut to it now. We're going to be talking about FTL, Faster Than Light, which is the full name of the game according to Wikipedia.
Yep.
I know very, very little about this. I know it's something about like you pilot a spaceship. I think this is the one where it's like you're just trying to keep things from like falling apart on the spaceship.
Yeah, defs. I haven't played it, but I think that's right. I'm not fully sure. Yeah, but it should be fun. I've heard a lot of very good things about this game.
Yes, same. And, based on what everyone's been saying, it is roguelike. So, I'm interested to actually just try that genre out. It's available. I find this interesting. It's available so PC Plus is the game club lingo I've been using to mean like Mac and Linux as well as just Windows. Mm-hmm. So if a game, exists on non-Windows platforms, I'm just putting a little plus there. And then iOS, which I think is interesting. Like, I wonder what the control scheme is like that it supports iOS and keyboard and mouse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wonder, people are talking about whether Transistor should be released on iOS as well. I haven't played FTL, but I've played Into the Breach, which is the other game made by Subset Games, the people who made FTL.
I've heard very good things about it as well.
Yes, it is like an exceptionally well-designed, like a brilliantly designed game. So I'm very excited to get into FTL and see that as well in here.
Yeah, cool.
I guess that's the end, is it?
It is. This is the last slide.
Yeah. All right.
So,
well,
cool.
Bye everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming along. And yes, people, I'm wanting you to just so you know, Into the Breach is their second game, and some people think it's different, but some other people think it's better. So yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see. I mean, I've heard so much about FTL for years that I struggle to think it won't be, very good.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be great. I mean, it's going to be the same as Transistor, where the worst case scenario is it's going to have made some very interesting choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
Well,
then
play
Mike.
it if you want. I'll probably be streaming it at some point.
Yep.
We'll see. I've moved into a new house, so we'll see what my streaming setup is
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
Basically,
yeah.
so stay tuned.
In case you're wondering why Ruben lives in such a barren room right now, it's because he's
Yeah.
halfway through moving.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, actually, and while we're here, I should plug. I've started streaming for the other video series I'll be launching soon called Into the Sandbox.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you go to the Doof Media calendar, you can see when I'm doing those and playing through Super Mario 64 at the moment. Should be a lot of fun.
Should we talk about mods in
Yes.
FTL? Are you going to play with mods, Elliot?
I mean, not to start with.
Yeah.
We'll see how I go. I think, like obviously we've got some people in chat saying that mods are important to this game. I mean,
Yeah.
the only game I've ever modded in my life is Beat Saber. They're not something I've really played with before, so that might be fun to look into.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get some people to put together lists of recommended mods after you play the first run through or stuff like that, and we can go from there on what some prime mods that you should put in are.
Yeah, because I think that could be an interesting thing to talk about next month.
Oh, okay.
The concept of
Apparently,
mods.
Captain's Edition is the what you should put in. I guess I don't know if that's a mod or something. Whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we'll check it out. Like, I think that'll be an interesting extra topic to talk about next month.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
So we'll
let's
see
get
you
there.
all. Yeah, we'll see you on the 4th of July. So, R.I.P. America.
Yeah, Independence Day, we call that.
On at 9:30 Central. So I guess everyone but the American viewers will be here with us. I assume they'll all be
America, you can figure
partying.
it out. It's your own job to figure out how that works.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll
If
see
you
all
tune
next
into the
month.
stream, we'll definitely have some digital fireworks.
Yeah, I can probably get some tacky firework effects in
A
Streamlabs.
firework gif. Yeah. Anyway, all right. See you, folks.
See ya. End.